Hello, I'm Novelette and welcome to Morgen Talk. In 2008, my next guest, Ashley Carroll, received her bachelor's degree in finance and business management and has practiced in that field ever since. Recently, the past 7 years, she has ventured onto a healing journey, which included dowsing through spirituality. Today, Ashley will talk with us a little bit about building wealth and how dowsing can help you make the right decisions. Hi, Ashley. How are you?
Hi, Novelette. I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really looking forward to our conversation today.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. I'm super excited to talk to you more and get to know you more and support you.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. I should say, I reached out to you because we met on Clubhouse and I was very excited about some of the topics that you covered, which included financial education. And one of the first questions I want to ask you is first, you mentioned, well, let's start with this. What do you consider some of the wealth building secrets?
Yeah, well, there are a lot. One of the main ones that wealthy do is avoid paying taxes, right?
Mhm.
So you probably hear that. They talk about that all the time. And so they avoid them, I guess, for the most part in a legal way. I'm not, I can't really comment to that, but there are many legal ways to avoid taxes. So that's one of the top ways that the wealthy maintain their wealth and continue to grow their wealth. And there's a lot of different avenues in order to be able to grow your money, but avoid paying taxes. So I'm happy to talk to those. But also just having what I call like a good financial report card, meaning you have, good credit, you have, either the right debt or a limited amount of debt, right? So debt isn't necessarily a bad thing, but certainly like credit card debt is not optimal because it's very expensive. Whereas a mortgage tends to be seen as a good debt to have, right? And then knowing their budget, what's their cash flow coming in and their cash flow going out. So those are some of the main priorities for wealthy, or just what people in general should be focusing on.
Okay, and you mentioned that there are investments that's only available to the top 7% of the population. That's not available to the average investor. What are some of those?
Yeah, so the one in particular I was talking about is called the private reserve account. It goes by many names. The actual like term in the dictionary, so to speak, would be self-banking, but then there's like infinite banking as a term for it. Premium deposit accounts, private reserve accounts is the one specifically that I use. So that's actually the one that about 7% of the population utilizes. It's not that it's only available to them, it's just that most other people don't happen to know about it. So the challenge associated with that is information. And so that has been one of my missions is I recently got involved in the past year in a mastermind group where we focus on building wealth in our lives. So I actually work in corporate finance. So I work for an organization in my day job where I actually help them make investment decisions, and I do analysis and I do like a whole lot of stuff. But one of the focus areas for them is for them to continue to grow their profit and to make the right financial decisions. But all this time, for over like about 13 years or more now, I've been doing that. And I was like, what am I doing in my own life? And so I wasn't, not that I did nothing, but I certainly didn't do everything as optimally as I could have. And so even though I went to school for finance, I have a degree in finance, I work in finance for a long time now, I wasn't like schooling, and people don't necessarily teach you the most optimal way for you to build wealth in your life. And so with getting involved in this group, I've actually learned all this information. And so I felt very grateful and so excited to know this. And when I get excited about something, I just love to share it with my friends. You can ask them. I always get really excited, like, you have to do this. It's the best thing ever. And so, I noted that in my Clubhouse because I've been using Clubhouse as a way to share the information. And so one topic, I actually partner with someone, Dr. Brooke Elmore, and she, her and I run rooms usually there where we share information. So we've been sharing information specifically about this account and all the benefits associated with this account. So that account in particular is the one that I was referencing in my profile.
Excellent. All right. So then with all these options and how to build wealth, so someone just started out, where do they start?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, where do they start? So, okay, it's hard. I mean, I can give some general advice, but I will say if you're in a position where you need to make some changes, financial changes, I would highly recommend getting attached to experts in certain areas, right? Because they're the people that like know the best way to do things. Like I'm someone like, for example, I mean, I can spend hours and hours researching everything that I'm specifically interested in figuring out. And I do sometimes do that for many, many topics that I'm interested in. But, there's only so many hours in the day and there's things I want to do and I want to have a work-life balance. So I just align myself usually with experts in a specific area that I'm looking for. So that's why I got involved in this group. But, there's definitely things that, general things that people can do themselves and they don't necessarily have to like hire someone or work with someone to do that. And there's, by the way, plenty of free resources for a lot of this information. But, like budgeting is a big thing, right? So, depending upon how you are with money, it's certainly ideal for you to at least have an understanding for, okay, what's my take home pay, like after taxes from my job or my different jobs that I have. And then what are my expenses? And then the difference between that is now I need to figure out what I want to do with that money, right? And so one of the first things you'd want to do is build up a emergency fund. So I'd recommend 3 to 6 months of living expenses saved, like in a liquid account. So money that you can pull out when you need it. It's not, necessarily in the stock market or in a 401k, obviously, right? So it's liquid funds that you have available. So in case of an emergency, like a lot of people lost their jobs in 2020, right? And so that's where something like an emergency fund would come into play, is in that kind of a situation. So I do always recommend to at least have 3 to 6 months or so of living expenses. So that's where kind of budgeting is important, because you need to know what your living costs are. And then, after you do that, you can then look at what you have left and make a savings plan for yourself. So, okay, now I've done this. What do I want to save to put towards investments? So that's where like kind of the difference between that, what you're bringing in versus what your costs are, right? You're having to pay for every month. And so that's when you can actually use like the private reserve account, for example, as like an investment that you can do. You can, put money in for your 401k, or you can put money in the stock market, or you can put money in real estate investment. I mean, there's a lot of different opportunities for investment in the United States that are really great. But that's certainly like a main area to start with. And then two other big areas I mentioned were debt. So like what's your debt profile? Like, do you have a mortgage? Do you have a lot of credit card debt? Do you have like student
Student
loan?
loan.
Right. Yeah. So, and like, it's not a bad thing to have student loan debt. It's not a bad thing to have a mortgage, right? So like there's a purpose behind that debt, right? And so you have it for a reason, and like, you have a mortgage so you have a place to live and you have like a steady payment that you're making and that's not continually increasing, for example, right? Depending upon the type of loan you have, but and then like student loan, right? You're doing that for your career. It's an investment in your career. So those aren't necessarily bad debt, but there is actually ways that you can, there's tons of programs, by the way, to get like to reduce your student loans, depending upon if it's with the federal government or private care. So like there's actually ways to sort of like optimize some of that debt too. Obviously with a mortgage, you can like, depending where you are, you can refinance. Like now obviously is a great time to refinance because interest rates are really low. But credit cards, I don't know anyone that would think that's good debt, because the credit card companies charge these insane fees. It's usually a minimum of I think 15%. I don't think you can get a credit card that's less than 15% these days. And usually that goes higher, especially if you have debt to like 24, 30%. That's a ton of money to pay, like to pay on top of your debt. That's a lot. So that's certain, like one of your top priorities is to pay down your credit card debt, right? And then there's one thing now I lost my mind. So debt, budgeting, and credit. Sorry, that was the other thing I don't think I went in detail on. So credit. So credit is we could go into a lot of detail around that, but that would take a lot of time today. But credit is an area where if you have low credit, you end up paying more for everything, right? So it's, you're like, oh, I'm not buying a house. Oh, like no one's checking my credit. Maybe it doesn't matter. Well, when you go to want to do anything, honestly, with money, like credit becomes really important. And when you don't have the best credit that you could have, and there's many ways to make it better, regardless of your circumstances, you can always enhance your credit score, but you end up paying more money for everything in your lifetime. So a lot of people, what happens is they get stuck in this poverty cycle. There's so many people in this like horrible poverty cycle where you're not bringing enough money, your expenses are too high, you can't pay off your bills, you end up getting debt, a lot of times credit card debt, and then your credit score goes down because you're not able to pay off your debt. And then you just end up in this like valley that it's like you can't climb out of, right? But there's tons of resources and tons of people that can help you get out of that and start building wealth in your life. But that's certainly one area that you want to start with. Like if you're just brand new from scratch, you need to look at those items before you start moving into the investment side.
I gotcha. All right. But let's say if you're not brand new, you've been around the block a little bit, and so you have to make a correction. It's kind of similar to start, huh? Finding the right people to help direct you, or what do you suggest?
Yeah, I mean, I personally always think it's best to have an expert, especially if you're like, okay, I have, I don't know, $25,000 or $50,000. I need to figure out what I want to do with it. Like, it's really great to have an expert specifically working with you, because I mean, there's just so many options out there. So, I mean, one thing in particular that a lot of people do, because we're programmed, there's a lot of things that we end up being programmed. People don't necessarily realize, like in society, it's like, go get a job, work till you're 65, put money in your 401k, retire, hopefully you get Social Security, depending upon your age, maybe not. So, and I'm not a huge proponent of the 401k. Actually, the person who invented the 401k said he invented a monster. So that's kind of like interesting because it locks you in. It's in the stock market. The stock market can go up, you can make a bunch of money, or the stock market can go down. And when you have your money in the stock market for a long period of time, like you end up going through those hills and valleys where it goes up and it goes down. And so, it's not necessarily the most ideal investment all the time. And your money's, you have penalties if you want to take it out early. Like if you need money like in 20 years after putting it in your 401k because I don't know, you want to send your kids to school and you want to use that money, or like something comes up in your life and you need it. Maybe you don't have an emergency fund, but you have an emergency and you need to tap into those funds. Well, you have to pay a penalty on them. And then you have to pay taxes that realistically are going to be at a higher rate because right now taxes are at all-time lows. And, Biden has a very interesting tax plan that, they've shared a lot of information on, and that's increasing, like it's increasing. So, when do you want to pay taxes? Now when it's low or in the future when it's high? So it's not like, in my opinion, necessarily the most optimal investment. I'm not saying don't put any money in your 401k, but there's a lot of reasons there's a lot of, for example, the private reserve account is a great alternative to a 401k because you can add money to that account and it's liquid. You don't have to pay taxes on any of the gains. It's actually connected to the stock market and you can take the money out penalty free. So, I mean, there's a specific guideline around it depending upon how long you've had and how much money you can take out at certain periods of time. But after you've been in it for, depending upon your age, like 6 or 7 years, it's almost like 100% liquid. So, which is not the case with your 401k. Your 401k is like zero liquidity, without penalty, right? Until the age of usually 65. So, I mean, that's where, like, if you're starting out brand new, and you just have money that you want to put somewhere, I mean, I would recommend being diversified. So, you have some money, there's nothing, it's not saying don't use the stock market, but you have to understand that when you put money in the stock market, you're putting it at a risk because let's say you put $700 in the stock market. Let's say you bought Tesla. And it was, I think it's like around 650 now or something, but a couple of weeks ago it was like 750. So let's say you bought it at 750. Well, then it dropped like 100 and 150 points. And then you thought, oh no, I need that money. So you took it out, right? So then you lost $100 on it. well, that $100 is money you lost. You put in $750, you lost $650. So there is a risk of that happening depending upon what happens in the stock market. And obviously, again, most people are familiar with the 2008 crash where, I mean, people lost their life savings that they had because it's in the stock market. So diversify. I cannot say that enough, right? You don't want all your money in real estate because it's the same thing, right? The real estate market can crash too. Obviously you can also make a ton there, like real estate's a great investment. You can make a lot of money in real estate. If you get in at the right time, you get out at the right time, you can actually make a lot of money. But I can't predict the future. I don't know if you can, but you have to have an understanding for what risk you're comfortable with. But then definitely diversifying is very important. And personally, I think real estate is a great opportunity to invest. I don't necessarily think your home is an investment that you buy. I mean, if you do buy in the right area, if you maintain your home and you buy at the right time and you sell at the right time, you can certainly make a lot of money on it. But there's tons of opportunity for real estate investment without having to have without it being the house that you live in, right? And so real estate's a good option. Private reserve account, I would highly recommend that because you can use that. I mean, I guess I'll go in more detail about it now, but it's basically your own bank account. So it's your own bank account and you can you add money to the bank account. The average is about an 8% return because it's actually connected to the stock market, but it's insured. It's like a bank is insured. It also has insurance, so you can never lose money. So if you put $700 in that account, you'll have the $700. Like you can never lose that. And then whatever gains you get on that account are also become locked in. So when the stock market dips, the account doesn't make the same return, right? Because the stock market went down, but you don't lose the money. But then, once you've accumulated enough in it, you can actually loan yourself money to buy a car. You can loan yourself money to send your kids to school. You can loan yourself money, like if you have enough, like for a mortgage on a home. And so that's actually something that these 7% of the population, which are these really wealthy people, they've been doing since the 1700s. Like the Rockefellers have been doing this since the 1700s. They have a book about it where they talked about doing it. And so like, that's a great, that's just a little bit about that account and the benefits in it, but that's a great investment. And then, I would say like, if you want to do your own, work in the stock market, just, familiarize yourself, make sure you know what you're doing and you're not, investing everything in one place unless you just for some reason feel really comfortable with that. But, I'm not saying don't do any investment in the stock market, but you just have to understand the risk profile there, right? I mean, there's a high opportunity for risk. So
the investment account that's basically being utilized by 7% of the population, was that what was the account called again?
Yeah, so there's many names for it, I will say. So the term for that is called self-banking. So it's basically like it's having your own bank account, basically. So I have one. I call it the Bank of Ashley Carroll, which I like. I like having my own bank account.
Right.
Because I get to set my own rules and I get to loan myself money and those kinds of things. And I don't have to pay a bank to do that. Because when you put money in the bank, what the bank does with your money is they loan it out to they pay you nothing for that. Like it's such a minimal, I mean, I don't know anyone who has a high interest rate in their bank account. They pay you basically zero for that. And then they loan it out, like in mortgages and other loans and those kinds of things. And they make a lot more money on it, but they don't cut you in on the deal, right? So I wanted to cut myself in on the deal, but the term is self-banking, but there's a lot of different terms for what different like companies would call it. So like premium deposit accounts as an example, private reserve account as an example. That's the one I have as a private reserve account with this specific organization that I partner with. And but there's a couple other names for it, but those are kind of some of the main ones.
Okay, so is there some kind of barrier to entry? I'm just wondering why it's not so easily accessible or known of.
Well,
like a minimum or something to get it started. That's a bit on the high end.
The minimum, I'm trying to remember. The minimum is something like $600. It's a very small amount. It's like $300 a month, I think is what it is, right? I think that's what it is. Sorry, I don't know that off the top of my head. It's not a high number. Right? It's something like, I think $300 a month that you'd have to
Okay.
commit to saving and putting into the account. Why don't people know about it? Oh, that's
Mhm.
like a whole other interview.
Mhm.
I mean, okay, I'll tell you. I mean, in my opinion, it's because like the information is just not widely shared. And I mean, we could talk a long time about why different information is not shared with everyone to help everyone have the most optimal opportunities in life. But the information is just not shared and people don't have access to it because I didn't know about it until like 6 months or so ago. But because the wealthy people, they're attached to specific financial advisors that don't work with people below a certain income level typically, right? So
Mhm.
if you're not meeting that income level, you're not getting those same financial advisors, fiduciaries that are working with you to give you the most optimal portfolio for yourself. And so that's like when the real challenge is just that the information's not shared. So it's there. You have to like really search for it and find it, but it's not shared. But hopefully every time we talk about it, the more and more people are aware of it and the more and more it's shared. But it's just like people not having access to the information. I
Mhm.
mean, there's way more like, like, and related to this, I mean, I've been in a health journey for the past 7 years, and the amount of information I have learned on the health side, I'm like, how do people not? Like, no, I mean, it's amazing the way everything, frankly, is just works in society.
Mhm.
Uh, so, and I don't know, like, what's the reason it's not shared? Like, is it so that wealthy people can sort of maintain their wealth and they're not so focused? There is the gap between the have and the have-nots. I mean, that's something that's like very prevalent and aware in most countries. There's a really big gap between the haves, which are usually the wealthy, and then the have-nots, which are usually the people who are not wealthy and that are living paycheck to paycheck, or if
Mhm.
they're even able to do that.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay, so to segue into another subject, um,
Yeah.
you mentioned dowsing in the clubroom chat. Tell us about that and how that interrelates to wealth building.
Yeah. So dowsing you can use for anything. So dowsing is it's using a pendulum. So I have my pendulum here actually. You can use like any form of pendulum. So like this is the one that I use, but you can use, I recommend one made out of metal, but like this one has like a gem because the gem can pick up different energy, but this one works well for me. So you have a pendulum and then you connect to universal consciousness and you use a dowsing chart. So it's probably a little hard to see this, but this is a dowsing.
Mhm.
So Raymond Grace has some good resources on dowsing. So if you look up Raymond Grace, and he has the dowsing chart. So if you want to start with it, you can print it out. So I have a naturopathic doctor that I've known for a couple of years now, and she does dowsing in her practice for health of the body.
Mhm.
And so I learned from her, and she learned from Raymond Grace. But basically, you're just connecting to universal consciousness. We're all connected. We're all one. Ultimately, the reality is like we perceive ourselves to be separate because we live in a world of duality, but like ultimately we really are all one and we really are all connected. And so you can tap in many, many, many ways. You can tap in with consciousness, and this is just one way to do that. And so I use dowsing to help me. So like I'll ask like, what's the effect of me doing this? I mean, there's so many questions I ask and so many things that I like clear out energetically through dowsing. But as far as like on the finance side, I mean, I use it to check what's the best day for me to start this investment. What is this investment? What's going to be the effect of this investment? Like sometimes maybe the amount of something I'm doing. But I mean, from an investment standpoint, I typically use it more to understand, like, is it going to have a negative effect? Is it going to have a positive effect on me? And like, what's the best time period for me to start, or for me to like take out my money from somewhere, for example. So like right now I'm taking some money out of the stock market, and I was checking, okay, which is the best day to do that? I also use the astrological calendar to help me with that too, but I do both of them like combined at the same time. And but I use it a lot. I mean, that's the piece I use it for on the finance side and like investments, but I use it a lot for like helping friends who are in a position where they need some energy clearing. Like if you're, I mean, it's not the same thing, but if you're familiar with Reiki, for example, I mean, that's an energy, it's a form of energy to help someone clear out some stuck energy in their body. So this is a form of that. You're just doing it through a pendulum. And like, you don't have to have the chart to do it, but the chart just helps to guide you in what the answer is to different things, or just helps to guide you clear that. So, you know, I have friends maybe that are going through a challenge, or like, you know, for example, maybe I have a friend who has a court case about something. So I'll clear all the different aspects of the court case so that they can have just the most optimal outcome. You can't affect free will with dowsing. So people have free will. You cannot affect it. So you can't like force someone to do something you don't want them to do. Like, that's not what it is. It's honestly just optimizing energy. Everything is energy. So it's optimizing the energy, like in a situation for you or for a person. Like I'll douse myself and like clear out different things. I'll douse some different body parts I might have, like if they're seem a little unhappy. And then, so, I mean, I do it for that stuff, or okay, like I do it as a way like to check if like something I eat is going to affect my body. Like I'll say, okay, what's the effect of me eating this? You can also, there's a lot of ways to do that as well. I mean, checking in with the body, number one, you can just kind of talk to your body when you get clear, but you could do muscle testing. There's so many different ways of doing muscle testing with food. But you know, since I do dowsing and it's just easy, I do that a lot. Like in the grocery store, I do muscle testing a lot of times with different food, but I sometimes even dowsing in the grocery store. Like I bring a pendulum with me because it's easy. But like I douse my dog. I have a little doggy. He's sleeping next to me. I'll douse him and like him eating food and stuff too. So that's what I use it for.
Okay. All right. Wow. It has many levels to it, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, and there's a lot that I'm certainly not an expert on it, right? So there's a lot more to it than even I'm like connected with. But like I have a whole list of, I'm happy to share the material. So, you know, reach out to me if you would like them, or if you have any questions about anything I've talked about today, obviously.
Okay.
But I'm happy to share the materials. I have a whole list of questions that you ask. And like, basically, I mean, you could, you know, take a course like Raymond Grace has courses and stuff, for example. But, you know, it is just like a natural ability that we all have. We kind of lost that connection, a lot of us, and forgot that we had those abilities. So you can honestly just pick up the pendulum and start. I mean, that was what the class was like. Okay, pick it up and start doing stuff. Like there wasn't anything else to it. They didn't really like show me how to do it. It was just like, okay, start doing it. And you just have to trust. It's trusting yourself. When people do it and they're not, like, if their pendulum's not moving and not getting traction, like that's a lack of trust in yourself, right? So you know, for anyone out there who just wants to start trying it. But people all, by the way, use pendulums for a lot of other things, like that are, it's not that it's different, it's just like they use it in a different way. Like I know like some tarot card readers sometimes use pendulums, or I mean, plenty of like people in the spiritual place like use pendulums for a lot of different things, but that's just how I use it. It's just a cool little trick. Why not?
Sounds very interesting, actually.
Yeah, it is really interesting.
I'll have to look it up a bit. I might have to reach out to you to get some more information.
Yeah, I'm happy to share. Yeah.
Thank you. All right. So now with that bit, anything else you'd like to share with us before we go?
I'm genuinely happy. I'm super grateful for everything I have in life and everything I've learned and everything. You know, even like what is the bad, like everything, there's always a positive reason for everything, in my opinion. There's always, everything happens for your best good, even when it seems like it's the worst situation ever, there's always a good outcome. And so I'm just grateful to be where I am, and I'm happy to share information with people to help them, you know, in any of these aspects. My areas of interest specifically, you know, of course, are in the finance side, spirituality side. I personally practice non-duality. Advaita Vedanta is a Sanskrit name for it. And so that's like the spiritual practice I do, but I'm open to all things spiritual. I'm in a lot of spiritual groups and those kinds of things. I know a lot about different spiritual avenues because there's a million of them. So that's a big area of interest for me. And I'm actually stepping into a new career. So my life mission has really just been to help people. It's something that I always do, and it's something that I love doing. And I always get like such a warm feeling helping people. But I actually do it like too much. And I always get this message like, you need to put yourself first. You need to put yourself first. So I'm working on that. But I like genuinely love helping people, and I want to help people heal. So I've been on a healing journey for years, for the past 7 years, and I want to help other people heal. And so I'm actually stepping into more of like a counseling therapy role where I'm going to help people with deep emotional healing. So if you have any interest there, or you want to connect and you have expertise in that area, I would love to connect with anyone on any of these.
Lovely. Thank you so much for sharing that. It's fascinating. So